Welcome to ZOOMERTIMES TV. And here's your host, Anita Finley.
Hello, everybody. This is another special Zoomer Times presentation, and with the celebrity author, Darwin Porter, and he's calling in from Staten Island, that beautiful island where they, I think, now have a Ferris wheel. Is that right, Darwin?
It has a what?
A Ferris wheel.
No. There were many plans for it, but all that has been put on hold. It's been suspended now, and
I told a friend of mine that it was there. They said, "Oh, I didn't know it was there. I didn't see it." I said, "Oh yeah, it's there."
it will happen one day, but not now.
Okay.
Actually, if you don't mind, I don't want to talk about vaccinations and abortion, but I want to indulge in some old-fashioned Walter Winchell gossip.
I love Walter Winchell. My goodness, I haven't heard his name in a long time.
Wow.
That hasn't quite made the tabloids. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'll get right to it. What is the biggest scandal that I have heard? This is secret now. It's not been made public. I won't tell you my source, but there are some wonderful actors that you have seen many of their movies in the late 80s and 90s. And of that crowd, the only one that has survived and is still working and still looking good is Tom Cruise. He was from that period, and he's still around, and Mission Impossible. But there are many of the actors that we saw you haven't seen, and probably you won't hear from them until it's time for their obituary. So many of them have saved their money and are living well, but some didn't save their money or didn't make that much money. Maybe they were under contract. So guess what? Secretly, 5 of them have gone to an agent, very high-powered agent, and offered themselves for sale for 1 year, beginning lowest price, $350,000 for a rich person. And now they're not as young as they looked in 1990, but they're still for sale. And 3 of them say it has to be a woman. 2 of them are without gender preference. And we'll see what happens. Now,
Wait. I have to ask you a question. So when you said for sale, I thought you meant they were going to get together in a movie. You're not talking about a movie. You're talking about bodies, right?
Human flesh peddling.
Oh, okay.
Now, let me give you a quick precedent for that in Hollywood. The first, Francis X. Bushman was a famous movie star of the silent screen. He's still remembered for the race Ben-Hur, the Ben-Hur race in the most famous silent screen film. Charlton Heston remade it in 1959. Chariot race, world famous. In 1929, he had earned $750,000. That's a hell of a lot of money in the 20s. And he lost it all in the Wall Street crash. And then Louis B. Mayer kicked him out. So in the papers across the country, he advertised himself for sale for 1 year. So I'm saying, I know it sounds incredible, but so maybe these actors heard about that story, and we'll see what happens. I think I know who they are, but of course I modesty. In other words, it's not Johnny Depp and it's not Brad Pitt, okay? And it's certainly not Tom Cruise. I also, like Winchell, want to move on. I have a lot of gossip about Prince Harry. He and his wife, they are under massive negotiations. It's incredible. They may end up being richer than the royal family if all these deals go through. Let me give you an example. Several book publishers want him for millions of dollars to give the real, what they call the real lowdown on all these secrets we've been guessing about. Going back to his relative, the Edward the VIII, who was the Prince of Wales, and in 1936 he left the throne, gave it up for, quote, the woman I love. Of course, I've read 16 books on the Windsor. That was all what they say today on TV, BS. That's now said commonly, as you know, on TV. There may be reasons, there were other reasons he probably left the throne. One was he was about to be exposed in a big homosexual affair. And also, he had figured into Hitler's plan for the conquest of England. For example, he and the Duchess flew to Berlin and had a wonderful meeting with Adolf. And the plan was, when Britain took over England, they didn't want a German on the throne. They wanted a figurehead. So they wanted to put the Duke of Windsor and restore his title of Henry VIII. So Churchill really had a lot to do in getting rid of the Duke and Duchess. And you and I, on a previous program about Hollywood's most famous pimp, Scotty Bowers, he admitted supplying young men to the Duke and young women to the Duchess. So it wasn't quite the juicy love affair. And so publishers want that. They want to find out who made the racist comment. Apparently it was Prince Andrew about what color is their next baby going to be born. And another thing that we've dealt with, they want to know what Harry says about who is his father. Is it Prince Charles or Jimmy Hewitt? Now, I have investigated this scandal for many times, and the statement was they met after Harry was conceived. Now, Diana's secretary, they've even photographed the house. 2 years before that, they had this secret rendezvous apartment, or flat, they call it. So this idea that they met 2 years later, the secretary, I guess he got fired. And you know, when you fire someone, they tell tales maybe. And so they want that, and they want stories about his father, his grandfather, and anything they can dig up on Queen Liz. So they're demanding, I think, maybe more than he wants to tell. But I think the first offer has been made to him is $20 million, which for a book advance today, that is very good. There are not many $20 million advances. I don't know if he will do it, but I want you to know a tell-all, and he would be the man to do it. You know, he must know all these things. So I think, and I bet you will read it if it comes out. We may
maybe that's going to be one of your books.
Yeah, but now here is, well, we'll see. We'll see what's going to happen. Now, Meghan, believe it or not, she may lend herself to endorsements. She cannot use the royalty tie-in. And the latest revelation came out yesterday. They were talking about it might work to a 100 million to 200 million. So that would make the book advance look very slim. In other words, they are not going to be poor. They are going to be very wealthy, because you know they've been cut off from the royal stipend. So that's some gossip, I thought. A lot of people don't know that about, they still believe the story of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor as being a love affair, but I think that's been more or less discounted now over the years. And they were I think, sort of shoved a little bit, invited to leave England. And of course, I understand why Churchill had that point of view. I'm sure he heard the story that Hitler wanted to plant him as a figure. That wouldn't go over with Winston Churchill at all. So
But going back to Meghan and Harry, you do believe that's a love story, don't you?
yes, yes, I do. Oh, yes. I don't mean to.
No, I know. I was just making sure.
No. That is indeed a love story, and certainly I'm amazed that people view them as. Oh, for example, I left out something. Harry has negotiated $100 million deal with Netflix, so they are going to be very, very well. So if you're feeling sorry for them for being cut off from the royal stipend and crying your eyes out at night, you don't have to do that anymore. So
Thank you.
in my Winchell style, can we keep on the royalty track?
Please.
Oh, the big news is a place I used to visit every year, Monaco, because I used to do that book on France for years and years. And I always stayed longer in Monaco than I did anywhere in the South because I loved it there. But Prince Albert is in more trouble. He's just in one paternity suit after another. And a few he's admitted, but he once said, if all the paternity suits coming in, I would have fathered half the children on the world planet. Many of them are bogus, but he's admitted to 2 or 3 of them. And during his what Douglas Fairbanks Jr. used to call the salad years, during his salad years, he was not married. He didn't get married to Princess Charlene until 2011. And he was born in 1958. So that was a lot of salad going on there. And now his Princess Charlene, she was a famous swimmer in South Africa. She's not African American. Many white people live there. It used to be ruled by white people. And there is a report that she is willing to settle in a divorce for $500 million. Now, he's worth at least $1 billion. That would take half of his fortune. So that's all being worked out now. And well, let's face it, he wasn't faithful to his wife, but neither was Prince Rainier to Grace Kelly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
No, he had a mistress in the 16th arrondissement of Paris. I have to tell, and of course, Grace Kelly, before she married the prince, oh my God, was there a leading man she didn't seduce? Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper said, Grace is so elegant and ladylike, but once you get her panties off, she's a wildcat. And, she had that serious affair with James Stewart and Ray Milan, nearly broke up his marriage, and she went down the list. And I have a real scandalous Grace story that I want to add, with your permission. I flew over to Paris. I hope we have time for this story. On Air France, I sat up front with a very charming young man sitting beside me. And we chatted and we talked. And he was from Philadelphia, which is the same place that Grace came from. And I brought up Grace Kelly, but he had no response to that. I said, well, I thought you might know because you're both from Philadelphia. And he said nothing, but he went on chatting. And my life has been filled with coincidences. I thought, well, goodbye, we'll see you, bye. And I was also there, my best friend, James Leo Herlihy, the author of Midnight Cowboy, the Best Picture of 1969. He was doing Edward Albert's The Zoo Story. So I came into the theater and he had a front row seat for me. And then right before the curtain went up, Grace Kelly and that young man arrived. And I
Oh, no.
I said, my life has been filled with this weird coincidence. And we smiled and everything at the play. Then 18 of us, including Mr. Hurley, were invited by this count down to his chateau. And I spent most of my life roaming the chateau country, but this was my first visit, and we were invited to be his house guests. And I arrived there. The three most attractive people I think I have ever seen in my life were waiting to greet the party from Paris. And it was a count. I won't give his name. It was a count. And he said, "This is my beautiful wife, and this is my handsome boyfriend," he said. And so we were introduced to the wife and the boyfriend. And then it was getting very late. And there were enough rooms for most people. I doubled up with Mr. Hurley, and Grace and this young man stayed in the suite next to us. And then the next day, I wanted to get out and see as I said, this was the first visit of me to the Loire Valley, and I wanted to visit some of the chateaus. So the boyfriend of the Count and the boyfriend of Grace wanted to go too. So the boyfriend drove a beautiful Rolls Royce, and that was my first introduction to the Loire Valley, where I would spend a great deal of my research in the future. And we had a wonderful, wonderful time. The princess refused. She had friends at the chateau, and she wanted to stay there and didn't want to roam around. And so we returned the party was supposed to be for a weekend, but it stretched on for about a week. And it was my most glorious introduction to the country of France. It couldn't have been better. Of course, I also saw the horrible side of, the steamy side of France too. But it was a fantasy introduction. But
I love the story about his being seated next to you, and he never said anything, and then he appeared. That's great.
Well, when I saw that he was with the princess, that's why he didn't say anything. In other words, he wasn't willing, because I'm sure he thought he would never see me again.
Right.
But it was, in a way, I thought Princess Grace added some stardust to that country. I'm sorry the way she died. She should not have been driving that car. She really should not. I mean, what is Princess Grace doing driving a car? And I've made that same route. In fact, I stopped once and pulled off and looked at where the car went over. I've been following Grace Kelly all my life. I'm quoted in some of her biography. I've never written a biography of her, but some of my stories have been quoted in her books. I mean, not her books, her biographies of her. And I always was fascinated by her. But her children, as often happens, the children don't work out as grand as the parents. I mean, sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. Anyway, I just wanted to share some of these stories with you that are going on. I could go on, and I don't know how much more time we have.
Oh, we have time. We still have probably 10 minutes.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes, because what has happened, believe it or not, the paper that I used, my mother started giving me the New York Times. Do you take the New York Times? I think you used to.
We used to take it. Now I just read what I can every day on my phone.
Yeah, what they do, I used to read, my mother started subscribing a copy for me wherever I was when I was 13. And I read every section of the New York Times art section, because movies, film, theater, those were at one time, I wanted to be a theater critic and to enter that as a profession. And today, I couldn't possibly make it through. The New York Times has simply sort of bowed out of covering the art sector. For example, a woman makes quilts in Brooklyn. They devoted 2 color pages to that. Well, I admire the woman for making quilts in Brooklyn, or there will be a big concert in Nairobi. Well, I'm great that they have this wonderful concert in Nairobi, but most of the readers of the New York Times, a survey has shown, are actually men and women in our age group, and they grew up with movie stars in Hollywood, and there are many things going on in Hollywood, but I pick up the paper and then a woman, 2 pages in color pictures, a woman in South London collects figurines. Really? I mean, I'm glad for her, and figurines are wonderful. I'm not knocking them, but 2 pages and the lead story in the New York. So now the New York Times, I think in every single department, except the arts section, is doing a fabulous job. But it's funny that maybe for money, for economy reasons, they no longer have a correspondent in Hollywood. In fact, at one time, I thought of approaching them and trying to interview them to be their correspondent, but I didn't do it. I got other offers. There are a lot of telephones ringing in this office. I'm sure it's the president or something calling me.
Right.
So anyway, I just
Go
wondered.
back to Walter Winchell. Go back to Walter Winchell. What else can you tell us?
Well, Walter Winchell, was not a very kind gentleman. I always was fascinated by him, and he could be. For example, I've just finished my first edition of Lucille Ball, and he was the first person who outed her as a communist during you were very
Right.
young, Joseph.
No, I remember that. Did he do that to her? Why did he do that?
Well, he did at a time that it was destroying. I think there were 250 careers destroyed in Hollywood. There have been books written about that. And what happened, and I investigated it, her grandfather read The Daily Worker from Moscow. He was a communist, really. And he insisted her brother and Lucille go down in 1936 and register as communists. They never voted that way. They did it to please grandpa. In other words, it's a story that could have been brushed aside. And guess what? In blaring Second Coming headlines across America, Lucy, a red. In other words, there's more red about Lucy than her hair. And now she escaped. Desi went on, he addressed the public. He said, Lucy's being exposed. The only thing red about her is her hair, and that's even fake. But Winchell would do that to you. He certainly didn't have many friends, but I'm just citing one example. Of course, there are hundreds of things, but he was the most powerful columnist in America.
Really?
He was, and he could what they say, destroy you. So, and he used to have his table. There were a famous Stork Club. You've heard of the Stork Club in New York. That's where the celebrities went. And he sat there at his table. He didn't get and run around town. The town, I noticed, I used to go in there. They came to him. And you look up and there was Clark Gable talking to Winchell, meaning the other people had to have laid men covering Hollywood at night, finding out things. And Winchell just sat there grandly by himself. I've never seen him with any other man or woman. By himself, always, and the celebrities came to him. I remember one night, Joan Crawford was working. We were doing a Pepsi Cola commercial for her, and she wanted to go to 21. Well, she just almost left me at the door, and ran immediately. So he had no columnist, I think, has that kind of power anymore. But and Burt Lancaster sort of did a ripoff on him in a movie called Sweet Smell of Success, where he played, a vicious, with Tony Curtis as a press agent. And that was sort of a caricature or a takeoff on Winchell.
Where did Winchell write? Did he write for the New York Times?
No, he had, I forgot what it was now. It was, it's gone now, the Herald Tribune. That was sort of the Republican paper. The New York Times was more liberal, and the Herald Tribune. I kept subscribing to it, but it was published in Paris. I got copies of it when it was published in Paris. So how are we doing now? We're doing. Can I go on? Okay. Volume 2 of my Lucy book is coming out in December, because that's when the Lucy and Desi movie is going to open. So distributors, I was going to do it in Halloween, but now we're doing it. The movie with Nicole Kidman will play Lucille Ball, and so she will be in papers all over the country, because that will be widely reviewed. A movie based on Lucy and Desi, and so my timing of the release date couldn't be more perfect than December. So I hope to sell a lot of copies of Volume 2 of Lucy. I finished it. It's in pre-production now, and I have moved. Are we going off?
You're okay. So let me ask you: is the cover going to look the same?
Oh no! It's a totally different story. In fact, it's a sad story. It's a story of the latter years of her life, but yet it is triumphant. It showed that, used to people were retiring at 65, and most actresses after 40 were having a hard time in Hollywood. And Lucille went on until 2 months before her death. She appeared with Bob Hope at the Oscars, and they got the biggest standing ovation in the history. But it's mostly how she survived with a second husband. It's about she created a second life after she divorced the Cuban band leader. I don't remember his name. I'm joking, of course. And I thought many women do that. They don't get the husband right the first time around, and sometimes that could pertain to millions of women in America. And she then found a man who would stay home more, let me put it that way, and wouldn't be running around seducing half of Hollywood.
And how are her children?
And then also the book is about her children and how she had to go through what many mothers of her generation in the 60s and 70s with her son, not with her daughter, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it's also the story of a mother. It is so different from Volume 1 that, but I found out no one had, every book seemed to concentrate on I Love Lucy. That was in the 50s. But the woman went on. In fact, she became really the most powerful woman in Hollywood. And guess it? The Gallup poll for 5 years voted her the most famous woman on the planet.
Wow.
Now, who would be more famous? You could say Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth would not be known in many undeveloped, they wouldn't know who Queen Elizabeth was, but they had the Lucy reruns. And so she was a powerful woman, and it's a powerful but also a tragic story. There was a lot of tragedy. So it's the first time I ever had to put a woman's life in 2 volumes because it's too.
She had a great business mind. So besides being an actress, that she had all these companies. That's what made her so rich.
She did indeed, and so was Desi. They weren't as, I mean, she could have played a dumb woman, but she was not a dumb woman. She's not at all like she called people. She said, "Don't ever call me Lucy. My name is Lucille Ball, not Lucy." And
did you know her, Darwin?
oh, I met her only one time. Well, I saw her several times. I met her only one time. And that's when I invited her to the University of Miami as a student council. And she and Desi, they were staying at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And I called her publicist. And I didn't even know if he'd accept my call. But I think because it was the University of Miami, they did it. And that's when I found out they weren't Lucy and Ricky, because they would be wonderful when people in the cameras were there. And then when the cameras were off, she denounced him for going out with 2 chorus girls on Miami Beach. So I got an early introduction that the Ricardos were fiction, but millions of Americans thought that was an accurate depiction. I'm sure your assistant, Dan Verity, knows all of those stories already, but.
Right. That's what more Dan. Well, Dan's just come on to tell us that we are running out of time, but this has been great. We've never talked about Walter Winchell. That's a name from the past for me, but
Yeah.
You always give us so much stuff that I probably can't tell this. I sit there with my mouth open. If there were flies, they'd be in my mouth.
If I had the money and could make the price, I don't have that much money, but I would certainly put in a bid for one of those middle-aged men to be your friend for a year, and
You're my friend for a year, for years. You give me just what I need.
But I thought that was the most interesting. So imagine putting yourself, as I said, Bushman, putting yourself, well, you know what? I think every one of them is going to sell, because some people have women, rich women, they have vast sums of money.
Right. So it's not a bad idea. I mean, listen, especially here in Palm Beach. Oh my goodness, they should do very well here. They all want a companion, and listen, and they're famous, so.
Palm Beach, I've been there many, well, I used to live near there, but they certainly have in what I saw in the old days, there were many elderly women with young men. And you know who set the precedent for that? Was the tobacco heiress Doris Duke and the Woolworth heiress Barbara Hutton. They bought and sold men like they were mink coats.
Isn't that
funny.
something?
Well, we don't want to have you shut off without saying goodbye, and thank you so much. And we love the column that you sent in, so that'll be fun.
Well, that's the first time I ever wrote about a real animal.
Right, I love it. I'm going to put him on the cover because he's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darwin.
You know what? One day you may have him as a pet.
Yeah, right. I'm going to get a stuffed one.
Okay.
Thank you, Darwin.
I want to tell you happy autumn.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. And don't do anything don't do anything for Halloween that gets you spooky.
Okay. So let's you.
Bye, Darwin. Bye, Dan. I know you're back.
Bye, Dan.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.